Setting stuff up real quick. Okay. Testing 1, 2, check, check. Okay. All right, I think we're good. So, hold on. 100 subscribers. We did it, folks. We did it. And as promised on Twitter, which you should definitely go and follow me on there, by the way, I'm going to be reading My Twisted World, the story of Elliot Rodger. Of course, I can't do it all in one sitting. Have you seen the audiobook on YouTube already? The one done by Monkey Jones? It's like 10 hours long. But, yeah. I think I know, Monkey fans, they already know about this guy, but, for those who are not in the know, we'll just go over, the basics before we get right into it, okay? So, let's go with the Criminal Minds wiki, I guess. That should be alright. Elliot Oliver Robertson Rodger was an American spree killer and schmooter who committed a rampage in Isla Vista, California on May 23rd, 2014, killing 6 people and injuring more than 22 others before taking his own life. Yeah, he was the one who did the Isla Vista shootings, and he's the one who coined the term incel. Okay? Well, no, after this, the term incel was coined, really, but he didn't do it himself, God forbid. But, yeah, he was born in London, England in 1991. His father was a British filmmaker, Peter Rodger, and his mother was a Chinese Malaysian woman named Chin. And Elliot's family, the Rodger family, was actually pretty rich. Like, they were definitely in the higher class. Yeah, so, yeah, I believe that's the basics of it. But we're about to get way into it. Because, over the next couple of streams, I mean, no, not over the next couple of streams. I'm not going to be doing this one after the other back to back. I want to stream other things on this channel. But I'll definitely make this a priority. So, yeah, we will be reading Elliot Rodger's manifesto that he typed out before committing his atrocity. And before we get into this, I want YouTube and everyone else to know I 100% denounce what Elliot Rodger did. It was absolutely awful, and he is a terrible, terrible human being. I do not in any way support him at all. Okay? Okay. So, hey, Kate. Yeah, we will just get right into it. 100 subscriber special. We will be looking into the mind of the monster behind the Isla Vista massacre, the schmooter, Elliot Rodger. My Twisted World. The Story of Elliot Rodger by Elliot Rodger. No shit. Introduction. Humanity. All of my suffering on this world has been at the hands of humanity, particularly women. It has made me realize just how brutal and twisted humanity is as a species. All I ever wanted was to fit in and live a happy life amongst humanity, but I was cast out and rejected, forced to endure an existence of loneliness and insignificance, all because the females of the human species were incapable of seeing the value in me. This is the story of how I, Elliot Rodger, came to be. This is the story of my entire life. It is a dark story of sadness, anger, and hatred. It is a story of a war against cruel injustice. In this magnificent story, I will disclose every single detail about my life, every single significant experience that I have pulled from my superior memory. Okay? As well as those experiences that have shaped my views of the world. This tragedy did not have to happen. I didn't want things to turn out this way, but humanity forced my hand, and this story will explain why. My life didn't start out dark and twisted. I started out as a happy and blissful child, living my life to the fullest in a world I thought was good and pure. What a melodramatic fucking loser. Like, take it to fucking Tumblr. God damn. Part 1. A Blissful Beginning, age 0 to 5. On the morning of July 24th, 1991, in a London hospital, I was born. I breathed in the first breath of life as I entered this world, weighing only 5.4 pounds. My parents must have been filled with happiness and pride that day. They had just witnessed the birth of their first child, and they named me Elliot Oliver Robertson Rodger. I was born to young parents. My father, Peter Rodger, was only 26 when he impregnated my mother, Chin, who was 30. Peter is of British descent, hailing from the prestigious Rodger family, a family that was once part of the wealthy upper classes before they lost all of their fortune during the Great Depression. Okay. Fuck off. You were still high class, okay? You had multiple homes. You had great life. You had a great life. Don't even give me this shit, you self-entitled prick. Fuck that. You lived in fucking London at first, then moved to America, and you had multiple trips around the world for vacations. So don't fucking give me that, Elliot. Don't give me that shit. My father's father, George Rodger, was a renowned photojournalist who had taken very famous photographs during the Second World War, though he failed to reacquire the family's lost fortune. My mother is of Chinese descent. She was born in Malaysia and moved to England at a young age to work as a nurse on several film sets, where she became friends with very important individuals in the film industry, including George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Oh, I bet she was fucking him. She even dated George Lucas for a short time. Yep, I was right. My mother and father had been married for a couple of years before my mother became pregnant with me. In fact, her pregnancy was an accident. She had been taking pills to prevent pregnancy, but when she visited my father on one of his film sets, she fell ill and the medication she took for that illness thwarted the effect of the anti-pregnancy pills, so their lovemaking during this period resulted in my life. Oh boy, he knew he was an accident. But I could have told you that. Only a couple months after my birth, I went on my first vacation. My parents took me on a boat to France. I was already a traveler. Of course, I have no memories of this trip. My mother said that I cried a lot. Yeah, but your family lost all its wealth in the Great Depression, yet you're able to afford this shit. Interesting. At the time that I was born, my mother and father were living in a house in London, but shortly after my birth, they decided to move to the countryside. We moved to a large house made of red brick in the country of Sussex, in the county of Sussex. With vast grass fields surrounding it. The house even had a name, the Old Rectory. This was where I spent my early childhood, the first 5 years of my life, and it was beautiful. The memories I have of this period are only memories of happiness and bliss. My father was a professional photographer at the time, just in the stage of becoming director. My mother gave up her nursing career to stay at home and look after me. My grandma on my mother's side, who I would call Amma, moved in with us to help out my mother. I would spend a lot of time with Amma during these years. Fucking hell. This was a time of discovery, excitement, and fun. I had just entered this new world, and I knew nothing of the pain it would bring me later on. I enjoyed life with innocent bliss. I can remember playing in the fields and going on long walks with Amma to pick berries. She would always warn me not to touch the stinging nettles that sometimes grew in our fields, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I got stung a few times. There was a swing in the back of our yard, which I had many good times on. The first birthday I remember was my 3rd birthday. My parents threw a party for me in our field. I had a helicopter birthday cake. I can remember one of my friend's parents cutting off the first piece and giving it to my friends. I threw a tantrum because I was expecting to get the first piece. It was my birthday, after all. My father bought me a toy tractor that I could ride around in, and I would play with it all the time after that. Okay? So, Elliot's tantrums are a common theme, to say the least. He was a little bitch throughout his entire life. He threw tantrums at, completely innocuous shit. Completely trivial things. Okay? So, yeah. Sometime after my 3rd birthday, we all went on a vacation to Malaysia, my mother's home country. I have only flashes of memory of that vacation. I enjoyed it very much. We visited a few of my mother's relatives. For preschool, I was enrolled at Dorset House, an upscale all-boys private school in the countryside, near where we lived. I was forced to wear a uniform, which I hated because I had to wear uncomfortable socks up to my knees. I was very nervous and I cried on my first day there. I can remember 2 friends that I made by name, George and David. I would always play in the sand pit with them. I didn't like school at Dorset House very much. I found the rules to be too strict. My least favorite part of it was the football sessions. I never understood the game and I could never keep up with the other boys in the field, so I always stood by the goalkeeper and pretended to be the second goalkeeper. My favorite part was playing in the woods after lunch. There was a particular climbing structure that I had a lot of fun with. Guys, I promise this is going somewhere. My preschool class once went on a field trip to the park, where I had the misfortune of getting lost. As my class was eating lunch, I ventured off to another area of the park, and when I returned, my class had moved on. I remember panicking and asking strangers for help. It was a terrifying experience for me. I was eventually led to my class by the strangers I talked to. Oh, that's just great, little kid talking to strangers. He was stupid, too. I remember one funny incident when we were taking school pictures. They forced us to sit cross-legged, which I hated doing, so I absolutely refused to sit that way for the picture. The teachers eventually conceded, and the picture was taken with me being the only one sitting differently. The holiday season was the best part of the year for me. It must have been very cold in England, but I don't remember the cold. I just remember how much fun I had. I was filled with joy when it started snowing outside. I loved playing in the snow. My father helped me build a snowman once. We would start with little snowballs and roll them around our field until we formed the body, then we would decorate it. During Christmas, my parents always had parties and gatherings. My father's best friend, Christopher Bess, who was also my godfather, came to our house frequently. We would often go to my father's parents' house in Smarden, Kent. Okay. I would call my grandmother on my father's side Grandma Jinx. My memories of my grandfather, George Rodger, are faint. He had fallen very ill at this period. My father's brother, Uncle Johnny, had a son 1 year younger than me, who was named George after my grandfather. I always played games with Cousin George in Grandma Jinx's garden. The 2 of us got along well. On New Year's Eve, our neighbors set up a bonfire party in the field next to our house. I was fascinated by how big the fire was. I had never seen anything like it, and it astounded my little mind. This was also the first time I saw fireworks. My father gave me one of those sparklers to play with, which I was enraptured by. Look, he had a good life as a child. Okay? And I think it's because, I don't know, it's just a theory, but I think his parents enabled his stupid bullshit and did nothing about it. And by the time it was too late, and he already committed the crime, his parents were a hell of a lot more concerned with covering their own asses than actually, denouncing what their son did. And, taking responsibility for the fact that they failed as parents. So, I think there are no heroes to this story. Everyone's an asshole. Like the Chris Chan story, everyone's terrible. Okay, let's keep going. There was one very special place that my father would often take me to. It was at the top of a range of beautiful rolling hills that I termed the London Hills, because I thought that London was on the other side of them. We would go there to fly kites. I can remember these experiences vividly. The hills were full of straw-like grass, and the weather was always windy, perfect for kite flying. It was a time of utmost happiness and joy for me. My father taught me to fly a kite by myself. The wind was so strong that I feared it would lift my frail little body up and carry me into the clouds. Once I got the hang of it, it was exhilarating. We would fly our kites together and run with the wind. I will never forget that place. My favorite childhood film was The Land Before Time. Good movie. I used to watch that movie all the time with Amma. It was about a baby dinosaur named Littlefoot who had just lost his mother and was journeying through a dangerous world to find the Great Valley, a land of prosperity and peace. I remember the feeling of utter sadness I felt during the scene when his mother died, and the triumphant and happy emotions that swept over me as he finally discovered the Great Valley after going through all the hardship to get there. I watched this movie so many times that just thinking about it brings the emotions back. It was a big part of my childhood. Already a world traveler, I went on a trip to Spain with my parents and my parents' friends Patrick and Lupe. It was the 4th country I'd been to at such a young age, but you know, his family lost so much money during the Depression. Okay, where the fuck was I? Okay. We stayed in an exquisite castle-like house that I believe was owned by a friend of ours. The house had a tower that I was extremely curious about. At one point, my parents and their friends ventured up to the top of it, but they made me stay below because I was too young. I was sorely disappointed. Oh boy, they probably had an orgy. Okay, As they were climbing the tower, I went outside to look at the cacti surrounding the house. These cacti also sparked my curiosity. Oh, they were so poor that they went on all these trips together. Exactly my point. Elliot Rodger was incredibly entitled and had severe delusions of grandeur, and he pretty much just felt the world owed him. So, yeah, big mystery as to why he couldn't get a girlfriend. That and a bunch of other reasons that you'll find out soon enough. Okay, so, as they were climbing the tower, I went outside to look at the cacti surrounding the house. These cacti also sparked my curiosity, and I foolishly decided to touch a cactus. I ended up getting cactus needles all over my hand, and it took a long time for my mother to remove them. What'd you fucking slap it? Dumbass? Shortly after my trip to Spain, we went on another trip to Greece. We stayed at a hotel near the beach. It was very hot there. No shit. The weather was new to me, as I was used to the cold British climate. The trip to Greece was significant because during this time, my father received the news of the death of my grandfather, George Rodger. He died of natural causes on my 4th birthday at the age of 87. It was the first experience I had of death of a close relative, and the first time I saw my father cry. My 4-year-old self cannot imagine my father ever crying, and so when I saw him cry that day, I knew how shaken he was. It was a very sad day for all of us. We immediately flew home. I believe that it was during the time after my 4th birthday that my father came to the decision to eventually move to the United States. As he was just becoming a director, he believed Los Angeles would offer more opportunities. We took a short trip to California to gain an initial look at it. I don't remember much of this trip, but I do remember having a good time. At the age of 4, I, Elliot Rodger, had already been to 6 different countries. Who can claim that, huh? Yeah, who can claim that, but you were so fucking poor. Okay, I feel like I'm coming back to that same point. I'll stop pointing it out. But, you know, it's worth mentioning. The United Kingdom, France, Spain, Greece, Malaysia, and the United States. It was also during this time that my mother became pregnant again. I was going to have a sibling. My parents decided to have another baby, this pregnancy being planned, so that I can have a sibling to grow up with. We later discovered it was going to be a girl. Before my 5th birthday, my mother went into labor to deliver the baby. I can remember the night vividly. I was very ill that night, a bad omen. I stayed at home with Amma while my mother and father were at the hospital, and we watched movies together. I was fraught with anticipation the whole time. And then my parents came back late in the night, and with them they brought back a little black-haired baby wrapped in a bundle. I had a baby sister, and they named her Georgia. I have no memories of what happened on my 5th birthday. Shortly after that, we were making plans to permanently move to the United States. The news excited me, but I was sad at the prospect of leaving my life in England behind. My father took a short trip to the U.S. by himself to scout out houses. I remember talking on the phone to him while he was there. He told me he found a very nice house for us to move to. I asked him if it had a swimming pool, and he said it did. This news made me very happy. And then the time came. We started packing everything up at the old rectory. On my last day at Dorset House School, my teacher was giving all of us candies when my mother came to pick me up early. I said goodbye to all the friends I had there. That was the last time I saw them. My father was given the offer to buy the old rectory for about £400,000. We were only renting it at the time. But he declined, a decision he would regret later on, as it would have been a worthy investment. Yeah, that's another common theme. His father is really shit at making choices, like, financially. There's one particular instance where he tried to make a movie called Oh My God, and he did, but it flopped so fucking hard it sent him into an actual financial crisis. We'll get into that later on in the manifesto. I cried as we drove away from the old rectory. All the experiences I had there, playing in the fields, driving my toy tractor, tending to my garden, going on walks with Amma, swinging on the swing, all those experiences were gone. I was about to start a new life. We boarded the plane and took off to America. Part 2. Growing up in America. Age 5 to 9. The plane ride was like a dimension between worlds. I was about to enter a whole new world. A whole new life. But none of what that went through my little 5-year-old head at the time. I slept for most of the journey there, and I can remember looking out the window at the vast stretch of clouds below us. I wondered what it would be like to go down there and run along them as if they were a landmass, not thinking about the fact that I would fall right through. When we arrived in America, I was very tired. We collected our luggage and loaded them onto a new SUV that my father rented. The image of us driving out of the airport is still fresh in my mind. I often think of it as my first step into my new life in the US. I was so sleepy when we reached our new house that I didn't even bother to look around yet. The house was partly furnished, so we already had a sofa and a television. The first thing we did was watch a movie. The movie was Independence Day, and I fell asleep at some parts, but managed to watch most of the movie. In the morning, I was full of energy. I eagerly clambered up the stairs to search for my new room. I looked at all the rooms before singling out the one I wanted as mine. When I told my mother about my decision, she told me that the room I picked was meant to be my sister George's room. I got a bit upset, but eventually settled for the room next to it. The house was quite big, with white walls and a beautiful backyard that led to a gated swimming pool area. It was located in an upscale part of Woodland Hills. The town of Woodland Hills has great significance in my life. It would be the town that I grew up in. A large portion of all my life experiences, good and bad, would take place in this town. I can recall the first time I said the name on my lips, Woodland Hills, as my new hometown. Soon after settling into our lovely new home, we were disturbed by a problem typical of California, an earthquake. Yeah, almost like people shouldn't be living in that shithole to begin with. My mother woke me up in the middle of the night, and we all hid under the kitchen table. The earthquake actually turned out to be very small, but with even smaller aftershocks following it, but I was still scared. Having never experienced an earthquake before, the only impression I had of earthquakes were the huge land-rupturing earthquakes I saw in the land before time. After this experience, I began to see earthquakes as common, minor disturbances. And there I was, a young 5-year-old boy who has so far lived a happy and joyful life, about to embark on a new journey. The journey of growing up in the United States of America. I felt a surge of enthusiasm at the prospect. I now considered myself an American kid, as I told my parents. I got accustomed to all the American TV shows, and I started to adopt an American accent. I was looking forward to my new life. Soon enough, I was enrolled in school. My father did some extensive school searching after our arrival. Oh, God. And he found a small private school on Shoup Avenue named Pinecrest. I was to attend kindergarten there. Pinecrest. My 5-year-old self at the time could not imagine how significant this place will eventually become for me. A great turning point of my life will eventually take place there, and a tragic turn for the worse. My God, so fucking melodramatic. But that will come later, in a darker chapter of my story, when I enter my preteen years. For now, I was a kindergartner who was enjoying life to the fullest. Kindergarten at Pinecrest didn't turn out so well. I had a very unpleasant teacher who was impatient with how far behind I was in my schoolwork. Yeah, join the fucking club. As I had missed a couple months of school due to the move. During playtime, this teacher would keep me in the classroom to do extra work in order to catch up. My parents didn't like this teacher, and one of their friends recommended another school for me, a private school nearby named Farm School. It was named after the farm that was attached to it. After only a couple of weeks at Pinecrest, my parents took me out of it, and I would not return again until I go to there for middle school 6 years later. My first day at farm school turned out to be a good start. I had 2 teachers, and they made an effort to introduce me to the other kids. There was one particular boy named Joey, who they assigned to show me around. He was nice to me at first, but would soon turn out to be a rotten little prick who I would always get into fights with. He then became my greatest enemy at the school. Okay. Like, he was 5, and he still, and at 22 when he wrote this, he still thought of this 5-year-old as a rotten little prick, proving that he cannot let shit go if his life depended on it. Jesus fucking Christ. My first real friend I made in the United States was a girl named Maddie Humphreys. Isn't that ironic? How so? The first friend I made in the United States was a girl. I don't think you understand what the word irony means, Elliot. She was the first female friend I've ever had, and she would be the last. Maddie and I started playing together at farm school, and eventually I know some people who can't let shit... Yeah. She was the first female friend I ever had, and she would be the last. Maddie and I started playing together at farm school, and eventually my parents became very good friends with her parents. Maddie's father is the famous British musician Paul Humphreys. I don't know who the fuck that is. And her mother is named Maureen, though we would call her Mo. They had a nice house in Hidden Hills. Our families got together often to have barbecues and dinners. I was a 5-year-old boy playing with a girl my own age like any normal boy would do. I was enjoying life in a world that I loved. I was happy and completely oblivious of the fact that my future on this world would only turn into darkness and misery because of girls. No, it's because you're a whiny little bitch. The girl who was my friend, Maddie Humphreys, would eventually come to represent everything I hate and despise, everything that is against me, and everything that I'm against. I was playing innocently with this girl, and in the manner that all children play. We even took baths together. It was the only time in my life that I would see a girl my age naked. Okay, seeing it like that, you took something that could possibly be seen as innocent and made it really fucking weird. Oh my fucking God, Elliot. When I think about the experiences I had during my friendship with her, it makes me think ominously of the fact that all children, boys and girls, start out the same. We all start out innocent. We all start out together. Only through the experiences and circumstances of growing up do we drift apart, form allegiances, and face each other as enemies. Wait a minute, wait. Another thing I didn't think of. They were 5 years old and they were taking baths together. Those parents are pretty fucking weird, bro. Only through the experiences and circumstances of growing up do we drift apart, form allegiances, and face each other as enemies. That is when wars happen, and that is when the true nature of humanity rises to the surface. At this stage of my life, of course, my war hadn't started yet, and it wouldn't start for a long time. I was enjoying my life without a care in the world, not knowing that all of my joy is destined to turn to dust. What a fucking loser. My kindergarten year at farm school was filled with exciting new experiences, all healthy for a growing boy. I had friends, I had play dates, I socialized with the other boys at school despite getting into lots of conflicts with Joey. I only got into trouble once over a quarrel with another boy during playtime. and I was sent to the principal's office. Having never been in such trouble at school before, I recall being overcome with nervousness and fear, which caused me to cry for an hour. I especially enjoyed our arts and crafts time, and I loved it when our class would go on visits to the school's farm. After a bright and joyous school year, it was time to graduate. I was swelled with pride as I wore my graduation cap at the ceremony. They held a graduation ceremony for 5-year-olds? It's kind of weird. I loved that school very much, and I was sad to leave it. Kindergarten was over, and I would soon enough enter elementary school. My 6th birthday soon followed. My parents arranged a Disney-themed party at a play center that my mother had been taking me to frequently. I invited everyone from my farm school class, all the boys and the girls except for Joey. Yeah, fuck you, Joey, you prick. I deliberately omitted Joey as an act of revenge for being mean to me throughout the year, and I felt a sense of satisfaction in doing so. Yeah, I was able to connect the dots there, Elliot. You didn't have to say that. The party was cheerful, and there was a man dressed as Merlin to host the festivities. I sat at the end of the table during my birthday meal, wearing a wizard hat. As my cake was presented to me, I felt only elation and glee as I took in a breath and blew out my candles. Life was good. Hold on, I'm gonna take a quick drink, and yeah, this is why I'm wearing the bandana. It's gonna be easier to take drinks of water rather than in the mask. Oh, that's better. Oh, yeah, that's better. Okay. 6 years old. My favorite part of the day during this jubilant period of my life was our afternoon trips to the park. Specifically, Soumaya Park. This park was beautiful and green, with concrete pathways cutting through the fields of grass, and a fun playground for us kids to play in. I always took to playing on the slides, and sometimes I would go on the swing, though my father had to push me. I remember getting jealous of other boys who were able to swing by themselves, boys who were even younger than myself. It was the shortcomings... Shit. It was the second time that I realized my lack of physical capability. The first time I had such an inkling of my shortcomings were those disastrous football seasons at the Dorset house. Hold on, yeah, that's better. Eventually, my father got around to teaching me how to swing by myself, and after some practice, I was able to do it. After that, I would always soar up and down on that swing in the Soumaya Park playground well into the hour of twilight. I was very small and short-statured for my age. I never gave this much of a concern during my early childhood, but this fact fully dawned on me the day my family took a trip to Universal Studios. At the time, I loved dinosaurs. I was fascinated by them. I had just recently watched the movie Jurassic Park, and when I found out that there was a Jurassic Park-themed ride at Universal Studios, I couldn't wait to go on it. We queued up in the line and waited for an hour. When we reached the front, the park staff presented me with a measuring stick, and I didn't fit the requirements. I saw other boys my age admitted onto the ride, but I was denied because I was too short. The ride that I was so excited to enjoy at the theme park was forbidden to me. I immediately fell into a crying tantrum, and my mother had to comfort me. Fuck you. Being denied entry on a simple amusement park ride due to my height may seem like only a small injustice, but it was big for me at the time. Yeah, it is a small injustice. Little did I know, this injustice was very small indeed compared to all the things I'll be denied in the future because of my height. He really believed the whole myth about women only give a shit about height. My God, I am 5'7", okay? And I am just fine. I'm a short-ass motherfucker compared to others. So, yeah. We resorted to trying out the E.T. ride, which I was admitted to. I had a miserable time on this ride, however, because the dark atmosphere and the mechanically moving alien statues that lined the queuing area scared the hell out of me. By the time we got to the actual ride, I was crying in fright, but later calmed down as the ride turned out to be mild and relaxing towards the end. Fuck. Excuse me. I always enjoyed my family's get-togethers with the Humphreys. These get-togethers became a common occurrence in my life. Maddie became a very close friend of mine. She was the only friend from farm school who I continued to see after I graduated. They had a huge backyard area, and the two of us would go on adventures. She also grew up watching The Land Before Time, and we would watch the sequels together whenever they released a new one. Sometimes when I went to her house, she would have other female friends there, and I played with them too. I had no trouble interacting with girls at that age, surprisingly. My 6-year-old self was playing with girls, unbeknownst to the horror and misery the female gender would inflict upon me later in my life. You know, you only said that 20 fucking times. In the present day, these girls would treat me like the scum of the earth. But at that time, they were all equals. Such bitter irony. Some women don't care about height. I don't. That's why I went. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like my height is very average. Like I think the average height is around 5'7", 5'8". I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on it. But yeah. Such bitter irony. Yeah, these girls treated you like the scum of the earth because you acted like a fucking retard towards them. You acted like they owed you all of the fucking attention in the world. Why do you think this happened, Elliot? Why do you think? Oh wait, he lacks any sort of self-awareness, so yeah. Okay, hold on. Fuck it, I gotta change to the mask because A, this bandana keeps slipping down, and B, it's crushing my fucking nose. Hold on. Alright, much better. Alright, yeah. Oh no, I guess I'll just keep the bandana around my neck like a fucking gay cowboy. It was now time for me to start the first grade. My parents enrolled me at Saranya Avenue Elementary School, which was just down the street from Saranya Park. I wouldn't remain at this school for long, however, because only weeks into my first grade year, my parents decided that they were going to move to Topanga. Wherever the fuck that's supposed to be. Most of the kids at Saranya Avenue School will end up going to Taft High School nearby, the place that will cause me great suffering in the future. Perhaps some of the kids in my class at Saranya will end up turning into those who would bully me at Taft. I don't remember any of the kids from my class there, so I will never know the answer to that. It is very disturbing to think about. I quite enjoyed my brief time at Saranya. My parents sometimes made me stay an hour after school, and I believe this was because they figured it would help me make friends. I can remember this after-school playtime being a positive experience. There were always games that I played with the other kids, and thus I was a bit frustrated when my parents told me that they were going to transfer me to another school after only a couple weeks of settling into Saranya. That frustration would soon cease, because the years that I would spend at Topanga Elementary School would be some of the best years of my life. The last years of being a carefree child. I started first grade at Topanga Elementary School a couple of weeks before we prepared to move to Topanga. Topanga is a secluded mountainous community surrounding a canyon that runs through the Santa Monica Mountains, located in between the San Fernando Valley and the Pacific Coast Highway. We had only passed through this community a few times when we would take trips to the beach. It has a certain rugged beauty about it. On my first day at Topanga Elementary, I was very nervous. Since it was about a month after the first grade term started, I was going to be the new kid at school. I remember the nervousness taking over my body as my mother drove us up the steep and steep road that led into the school proper. My new class was just lining up to start the day as we walked onto the main courtyard. My teacher, Mrs. Matsuyama, was very nice and understanding. Okay, Japanese. Interesting. My mother said goodbye and I got in line with the other students. The first very nice and... Fuck, man! Jesus, I keep fucking it up. My mother said goodbye as I got in line with other students. The first kid I saw there was a chubby boy named Bryce Jacobs, who was staring at me strangely. As we got to class, Fuck! As we got to class, Mrs. Matsuyama assigned one of the students to show me around and help me adjust. This student happened to be none other than Philip Blozer. Philip was always very mature for his age, and he was nice to me on my first day. He became my first friend at Topanga Elementary. The day turned out to be one of great fun. Class time was not too boring, and we did some fun arts and crafts activities. For recess and lunch, there were 2 playgrounds, the upper and the lower. The first and second graders would go to the lower playground, and the third, fourth, and fifth graders would go to the upper. The lower playground was smaller, but it had some nice amenities, especially the sloping hill to the side of it, where I would enjoy running up and down kicking dust, a game I instantly created due to the dust-like dirt on this hill. When my mother came to pick me up, I recall having so much fun that I didn't want to leave. That's a first. In the past, I was always eager to go home after spending hours at school. The drive to and from school was a long one, or at least long for my 6-year-old self. My favorite part of the drive was the descent from Topanga, fucking hell, into the valley. The view of the broad expanse of the valley was breathtaking as it opened up before us after clearing the final hill. I would make that trip through the winding roads of Topanga Canyon every day for the next couple of weeks, before we moved to the new house. Sometimes my mother would pick me up, and sometimes my nanny would. I don't remember the name of this nanny, as she was only with us for a brief period of time. I loved the new house the moment I laid eyes on it. It was a beautiful, round wooden house located up the road from Valley View Drive, in the better part of Topanga. It had 2 stories, a swimming pool, and a lovely deck that provided a view of the lush mountains. I instantly named it the Round House. I was sad to leave our house in Woodland Hills, our first house in America. I would miss the good times I had there, playing with Maddie and my other friends, swimming in the pool, the close proximity to Serania Park, where I spent a lot of time enjoying the elations of a carefree childhood. Our new round house in Topanga, however, turned out to be a worthy replacement. My room at the round house was a bit smaller than my old one, but I remember it being very cozy. Shortly after we moved in, Amma came to visit from England, and she baked my favorite peanut cookies. We had some very happy times during the beginnings of my life there. My father's new directing career was taking off quite well, too, as he would go away a lot to direct commercials for prestigious companies, leaving my mother and the nanny to look after me. The only downside of this was my father's absence from my life. Despite this, I always looked up to him as a powerful and successful man. Hold on one second. After I take another drink of water, I'm going to tell you all about these prestigious companies that Peter Rodger directed commercials for. Okay. Prestigious companies, my fucking ass. I saw one of these commercials. It was for Dog TV. A direct TV channel for dogs that you would put on when you leave the house that plays a bunch of noise that calms down the dogs and makes them feel less lonely. Prestigious company? Shut the fuck up. Adjusting to my new environment in Topanga was quite easy for me, especially since school was so much fun. I was now a Topanga kid. During recess at school, I started noticing this boy with slightly long blonde hair who also enjoyed kicking dust. Before I met him, I always mentally nicknamed him the King Arthur Kid, due to the regal look his hairstyle gave him. It was only a matter of time before our dusting, kicking antics would collide with each other. We then teamed up and started playing the game together, and this was the start of a long and interesting friendship. This boy's name was James Ellis, and he would become my best friend for the next 14 years of my life. Sometimes, the two of us would join with Philip Blozier and some other kids, and play fun games like handball, war games, and tag. Soon enough, I would start having frequent playdates with James Ellis. His house was just down the hill from mine. James's father was named Artie, and his mother, Kim, because one became fucking hell, god damn it! Get it right, goddamn motherfucker! And his mother, Kim, became one of my mother's best friends. Christmas arrived quickly, and for my present, I got my first video game console, a Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64! Oh my god, thank you! Yeah, that's an old fucking video. I had little knowledge of video games before this. I barely knew what they were. My father is the one who introduced me to them. With the Nintendo 64, my father bought the games Star Wars Shadows of the Empire and Turok Dinosaur Hunter. I was fascinated with this new form of entertainment, and my father and I would bond a lot over our video game sessions. Of course, while playing these video games, my innocent, happy self knew nothing of the significant role video games would play during a large portion of my life, and the sanctuary such games would eventually provide for me from the cruelties of this world. For now, they were just a form of entertainment like any other hobby. And he lacked the self-awareness to realize that if he was playing games 14 hours a fucking day, it was going to be a bit hard to get yourself out there and find a date. Life was good at the Roundhouse, but soon enough I had to witness my mother and father get into a lot of arguments. I was too young at the time to understand what they were arguing about, but I knew they were not getting along. It didn't really concern me all too much because every other aspect of my life was wonderful. I had playdates with James Ellis every week. Sometimes he would surprise me with a visit after school, as we lived so close by. I went over to Philip Blozier's house a few times as well, and I met his younger brother Jeffrey. The Bloziers also became good friends with my mother. They lived in a nice house up the road from our own, with a deck that provided an extraordinary view of the Topanga Mountains. At some point, I learned about the possibility that parents can separate, divorce, no longer live together. The prospect baffled my little mind. I once sat down with my mother on our outside deck and asked her if she and father would ever divorce. She told me it will never happen, and that I had nothing to worry about. I was relieved by that. Little did I know, such a thing would happen in only a few months' time. Okay, this is what I was saying, how there is no heroes in the story. The mother is a gigantic asshole for doing that to him. Okay? How the fuck are you going to sit there and tell your son, no, we're not going to divorce, when you fight with your husband often, and then end up splitting up with him a few months later? That is fucking scummy. Okay? I'm not defending Elliot at all. I'm just saying what Chin did was absolutely despicable and fucked him up. Definitely. Without a doubt. My first grade year ended splendidly. I made a few lasting friends, and I had a blast at Topanga Elementary. I always considered myself a good, well-behaved student, so I was a bit disappointed at the few times I got in trouble. My class had a system where if we do something wrong, we would change our card color from green to yellow, and then to red if we did any more troublemaking. I thought I would never have to change my card, but I had to change it to yellow a few times for minor things. When first grade ended, I made the resolution that in second grade I will never be forced to change my card. After my last day of school, I was looking forward to a long summer break. My favorite time of the year. I was a bit dismayed when my parents made me attend summer camp. My father had to go away a lot for work, and my mother needed to have some time to look after baby Georgia. Summer camp wasn't all that bad. I had some fun. It consisted of kids from 1st through 4th grade, and we played lots of games and watched movies. Fucking hell. I had to gargle some of that water because my throat's starting to burn from how much I'm talking. How long have I been at this? 50 minutes, okay. And we still got plenty to go just for this part here. 7 years old. My last memory of my parents being together was my 7th birthday, and I would always cherish it. We didn't have a party for my 7th birthday, but more of a small get-together for lunch. Maddie and the Humphreys were our only guests. We celebrated it at Gladstone's, my favorite restaurant at the time. It was in the Pacific Palisades, right on the beach. I had my favorite meal, lobster. You can take a 5-minute break. Yeah, I will, later on down the line. It was a very happy day for all of us. I was turning 7, and that was a big number for my little mind. I had spent 7 years on this fascinating world, and my life was at a good start. I had loving parents, I had friends to play with, I was having fun at school, and I had all the toys a little boy could want. A stranger would look at this 7-year-old boy and think that he has a great life in front of him, that there was nothing to worry about. Indeed, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. But I was just a child. I still had a few more years to enjoy life in carefree bliss before I would eventually discover how twisted and cruel this fascinating world really is. My parents seemed happy that day. I remember them laughing and having a good time. It would be the last time I remember them being happy together. Perhaps they really weren't. Perhaps they were just putting up a front so I could enjoy my birthday. I couldn't even fathom the possibility of my parents separating. Very shortly after my 7th birthday, the news came. I believe it was my mother who told me that she and my father were getting a divorce. Like right after his 7th birthday? Come on. My mother, who only a few months before told me that such a thing will never happen. Again, absolutely a scummy thing to do. I was absolutely shocked, outraged, and above all, overwhelmed. This was a huge life-changing event. My father was to stay at the roundhouse, and my mother would move to another smaller house in Topanga. It was arranged that me and my sister would mostly be living with our mother, and we would go to father's house on the weekends. My father was required to pay child support to my mother so that she can look after us. My life would change forever after this. The family I grew up with has split in half, and from then on I would grow up in 2 different households. I remember crying. All the happy times I spent with my mother and father as a family were gone, only to remain in memory. It was a very sad day. Just like the move to the US, it would be like starting a whole new life with a new routine. Despite the initial sadness I felt from my family splitting in half, my new life situation wasn't all that bad. It was still practically the same life, though I lived with my mother in one house and my father in another. My mother's new house was small and red in color, located up a steep driveway from Topanga Canyon Boulevard. I would call it the Red House. It was the smallest house I've lived in at that point. It only had 2 bedrooms, and I had to share a room with my sister Georgia. We had a bunk bed, and I slept on the top. I was quite uncomfortable with this change at first, being used to having my own room and living in bigger houses. My mother's kind and loving nature, however, made up for this, and she turned the household into a fun environment which I enjoyed living in. After spending the first week at Mother's house, Father came to pick me and my sister up for the weekend. Georgia had become very attached to Mother after this week, and she burst into tears when we drove off. I too was a bit distressed at having to go from one house to the other every week, but I would soon get used to it. The roundhouse was different without Mother being there. When we entered, I felt a wave of sadness creep over me as I was reminded of my life when Mother and Father were together. The house was full of memories, happy, cheerful memories that were lost in the past. With my mother missing from it, there was a sense of bleakness and loss to the place. My father did his best to cheer us up. I could tell that he, too, was very saddened by the recent events. My father soon rented one of the rooms of the roundhouse to his good friend Dan Pirelli, one of his first friends in America. Dan used to live close to our house in Woodland Hills until he was struck with financial troubles, which I'm assuming is why he started renting a room from my father. I would always call him Uncle Dan. From this point on, Uncle Dan would stay with us as a lodger for a few years. The time to start second grade arrived. My new teacher was named Mrs. Weisberg, and she was very kind. The students in my class were mostly the same as my first grade class, with only one or two new students who transferred from other schools. I made a few new friends, such as Shane and Tommy. I was very disappointed to find out that James Ellis would not be returning to Topanga Elementary for second grade. In fact, his family would be moving out of Topanga to the Pacific Palisades, where they would be renting a house from their friends, the Lemelsons. My father's stay at the roundhouse was very brief. He suffered some temporary financial setbacks on top of the divorce, so he decided to move to a smaller house on Old Topanga Canyon. It was a very abrupt move, and I would never see the roundhouse again. One day, after he picked me and my sister up from Mother's, he took us to the new house, and that was it. The house was a small 2-story house in a more rustic part of the Topanga Mountains. The upstairs portion had only a bedroom and bathroom, and it was rented to Uncle Dan. All around the outside of the house were very small hills and hiking trails that led up to the mountains. Overlooking these hills was a massive, imposing rock called Big Rock. When I first saw Big Rock, I told myself that one day I'll climb to the top of it. I took a liking to this new environment, and every time I visited Father on the weekends, I would always be outside exploring and adventuring. There were always new places to discover in that secluded region. I didn't venture too far into the wilderness, however, because of the danger of coyotes and mountain lions. After only a couple months since my 7th birthday, a new and very important person would come into my life. After Father picked us up from school one day and took us to his house, I saw a woman with dark hair and fair skin standing in the kitchen, and she introduced herself as Soumaya. We got another player in the game, folks. Elliot's stepmother, Soumaya. She would become my stepmother. Father told me that she would be living with us from now on. At first, I thought she was just another friend who was temporarily staying with Father, similar to what Uncle Dan was doing. My father having a girlfriend so shortly after divorcing my mother didn't even occur to me. I couldn't understand it. Soon enough, though, I realized that Soumaya was in fact his girlfriend, and they were together just like how my father and mother were together. It was the first time I learned the concept of a girlfriend, and it was hard to grasp. Before that, I always thought a man and a woman had to be married before living together in such a manner, and that it would take a long time for such a union to happen. Father finding a new girlfriend in such a short amount of time baffled me. I was completely taken aback. Because of my father's acquisition of a new girlfriend, my little mind got the impression that my father was a man that women found attractive, and he was able to find a new girlfriend in such a short period of time from divorcing my mother. I subconsciously held him in higher regard because of this. It is very interesting how this phenomenon works, that males who can easily find female mates garner more respect from their fellow men, even children. He's talking about these people like they're fucking primates, like they're fucking monkeys. Like there's a fucking social order to this. Fucking alphas and betas and shit. Talking about them like they're fucking apes. Fucking observing them like a goddamn nature documentary. It's so weird. How ironic is that my father, one of those men who could easily find a girlfriend, has a son who would struggle all his life to find a girlfriend. That being himself. I soon became accustomed to Soumaya being a part of father's household. She hails from the Akabun family. I don't give a shit if I'm mispronouncing anything. A very prominent family in the country of Morocco. Okay, so she was Middle Eastern, African descent. For the initial period of her being a new member of the family, we got along well and she was quite fun. But soon she would start to discipline me in a harsh way that I wasn't used to. I felt that because she wasn't my real parent, she had no right to discipline me in such a way, and so I rebelled. That's when the first conflicts arose. There would be many more to come in later years.